Hello, everyone. This is Emma. I hope you can hear and see me okay. For those of you that know me, you know I wear a lot of hats, but let me give you just a quick intro for those of you that might be new. My name's Emma Warden. I've been KiwiTech's US-based Senior Business Analyst for the past 2 years. I wear quite a few hats, like I said, so I'll give you kind of an overview of each of those. I'm a part of our solutions consultant team, kind of as first and foremost. With this team, we operate as a solutions and business consultant in the context of technology and product development. I've had the privilege of working with over 200 startups at KiwiTech since I've joined in this context. My goal there is to create a mutually beneficial partnership and kind of send off into development. The second hat I wear there is the project management hat. Here I guide our teams through development of those solutions that we have developed during that first phase and move on to production of that. The final hat is actually kind of on the opposite side of where I sit today. Typically, I do a lot of the moderating and everything for our online events. You might know me from our demo day series that we do now exclusively online. But for today, I'll be focusing primarily on that first hat, that solutions consultant. So I'm here today to talk to you a little bit about the minimum viable product. So let me just go ahead, turn off my video, and I'll get my screen share started for you guys. So let me know if you can see me okay.
Yes, we can. Thank you, Emma.
Fantastic. All right, we'll go ahead and get started then. So as far as my presentation today, I'm here to talk to you about those minimum viable products. So obviously the first question we have is what is that? What is an MVP? So an MVP is basically the first iteration of any development of any solution that you may have. For here, we're talking about those three kind of letters we have here. So it's a product, obviously, it is something that you can physically use and interact with, but it is that minimum viable piece of it. So it has the minimum amount of features, those core kind of concepts to be able to answer your problem statement. And it obviously has enough of it developed out. It is valuable enough and is viable enough that the users can actually go in, interact with that interface, and get back to you with feedback on whether or not these features are valuable, whether or not they are actually something they will continue to use, anything like that. So they really validate that problem statement and also your primary solution. There's a few different approaches we have here. I'm going to start by explaining this top one. So for all of the examples we're going to go through, our problem statement is I need to get from point A to point B, and I need to do it quicker than walking, obviously. So for here, the popular approach we see a lot is, people know, all right, the fastest way to do this is in a car. That's how we're gonna approach this statement. The issue here is the steps we took to get there. So if we look at 4, obviously that's our final product. That gets us from point A to point B. That's great. However, the steps we took to get there don't necessarily also solve that problem. They are components of the final solution, but they are not actually things that will get us from point A to point B. Unless you're really good at balancing, that wheel is not going to do a heck of a lot for you. Now that second row you can see here is also a way to get from point A to point B. We see just a scooter, we see a bicycle, a motorcycle, and a car. Now, this may seem like a progression to you. However, it doesn't actually answer that problem statement in a sequential order. So while these all get us from point A to point B, you don't have a motorcycle and think, okay, what's the next best step here is a car. They're all individual products in their own right, not necessarily a progression of development here. So let's rethink that. We see our first 2 issues that we had at the top that didn't necessarily answer that sequentially, or maybe all answered it themselves but didn't work together. For here, let's start with the basics, an MVP. So we need to get from point A to point B. We have some place to sit. We have a steering wheel. We have some wheels. So we have an engine. That gets us from point A to point B. From there, you really can add on any of those bells and whistles that you would want, but you're still solving your problem. So let's say we go on to 2 from that first piece here, that truck. From 2, we say, okay, we want to carry some things with us. So we add some storage. That's kind of that first feature that you might add on to that MVP. Your users tried out that one. They realized they wanted a little bit more things to carry with them. And so you add that on. From here, you can pivot. And we'll get into kind of some more details on pivots later. But from here, after you add on that first additional feature, let's say we also added on, electric windows, we added a radio, things of that sort. From here, we can kind of decide if we would like to add, what we would like to specialize for. So let's say your users keep saying we want to carry more and more and more. You go on from just a truck to a 16-wheeler and then on to cargo. The problem statement shifts from I need to carry things from point A to point B to I need to carry things from point A to point B over water. Kind of the other way we can go from there is, okay, I can get from point A to point B, I can carry a few things, but I need to go faster. So that is that bottom example you can see there. You optimize from just going from a truck to, let's say, a car, and then you keep on going towards that race car model here, optimizing depending on that feedback that your users have given you. As far as the problems that you have here, it's really about what is that core problem statement? Is it a really, really big problem? Can you kind of narrow it down into something as simple as I need to get from point A to point B? The issue that I often see in this solutions consultant space is that we are trying to basically, solve world hunger. That's great, but if we can shrink that down into solving a hunger problem that might be in our local city, then we have something that we can start there that's testable, and then we can keep expanding from there. So being able to define your MVP. You'll see some things flashing across the screen here. That's because there's a couple different approaches that you can take to this. There are three kind of pieces that we think kind of define your MVP: the problem, the solution, and your audience. And while you can approach those in different orders, we think this might be the best one. So identifying what is the issue, where is the gap, what can be improved, who are the people that have this gap, and then from there, what is going to be your better solution, your enhanced way of life for these people? How are you going to fix that? So from here, you can kind of analyze the industry landscape. Who's doing this already? What are they missing? What are they not doing? That can help you kind of define your problem as well as your audience, your niche. And from there, you can keep moving into what actually that solution is going to be. So the importance of an MVP. There's a couple pieces we have up here. It validates your idea. So is it actually something that's sustainable? Is it an issue that requires, a specialized solution that you would be able to create? Are there customers and everyone actually out there? Is there truly, truly a need for a solution here? You can get market feedback. You can see what the imminent goals are for your users, and it might depend on user base. It might depend on it might depend on what their income level might be. It might depend on if they live in a city or in the country or in the suburbs somewhere. It can depend on a bunch of different things, but you won't be able to understand those until you get out into the market and get those people's opinions. Additionally, you have traction. So it's really easy to go with a great idea to an investor. But what's more valuable is being able to say, look at what my users have been saying about my product. They are your best advocates. So being able to have users that are on there actively using is much more valuable if you're going out in kind of a fundraising situation. Additionally, the value here is that it's conscious of your budget. Because it is minimum and because it is the kind of that core initial iteration of development, it obviously costs less. You're not making it the prettiest application on the market. You're not making it the most, feature intensive, feature thing on the market. You're making it that it works, and you're making that it can prove, all of those previous pieces. Additionally, it's really good for developing your future strategy. So knowing that you solve that core problem statement, like we kind of talked about with the car, what you might need to add. Maybe they aren't focused on carrying load. Maybe they're focused on carrying speed. However, if you just went out and developed, a race car, you might not have gotten those same market results. So we've talked about how you can kind of figure out where your MVP might sit. How do you kind of measure that success? So the obvious pieces you have here is you have a product, they have a need. Are you actually getting users onto this platform? User engagement. Additionally, on top of that, after you've gotten those users, what features are they actually using? You might think you've created the perfect solution for a problem, but your users might see it a different kind of way. And you're not going to know that until they kind of get on there and start actively using that platform. You kind of keep working and getting all that different user feedback that can help you with kind of turnover rates on what features you might be developing next, along with kind of negating the need for any unnecessary development. So from here, once you have kind of users on that platform and you have their feedback, you have the different kind of ideas, you know exactly which direction you might be able to go to keep satisfying those users. Like we mentioned previously, cost and time to market are definitely kind of a successful piece here, because you can have a shorter time to market since it is lower amount of features, and it'll be a lower cost just because you are not developing as many features. The nice thing here is, if you have an MVP and it takes a few months to develop, that's great. If you have an MVP that's going to take 3 years to develop, you might not be developing what you think is an MVP. That might be something that's more of a full product, and it might be time to reevaluate what features are going to be measuring of that core success. So from here, defining your metrics, I think, is a really important piece here. If you are looking at a application that is for a medical professional, say, seeing how many downloads you have on a mobile device might not actually be a successful metric, because most medical professionals are looking at a desktop. They're looking at an iPad. They're looking at something that is at their station in their hospital and going from there. So, measuring, your amount of mobile downloads in comparison to something like TikTok is not going to be necessarily a metric of your success. Well, it certainly is a metric of success for something like TikTok. So basically, defining your own personal metrics will help you define your own success, making sure that those metrics are kind of appropriate, and making sure that they're really applicable to your product, not necessarily competitors, because the whole point is that you're in your own niche. Additionally, the speed of your success can vary. Some people will have, successful metrics over a few months. Some people will have metrics of success over a few years. That all goes back to your problem statement and how quickly, users will be catching on with kind of that adoption rate on solving that problem. So here, we briefly mentioned pivots earlier. So what is a pivot? Here is, once you have those core features and you have those users on your platform, what are they saying they need next? Is it exactly what you think it was going to be, or is it something completely different? It could be something as simple as our car example, where they want to go for speed, so you pivot towards building a race car, or they're looking for load, so you pivot towards that 16-wheeler. It really depends on what that feedback is, but the important part here is they need to be 3 things. They need to be the right pivots, so they need to be responsive to your user base. They need to be timely pivots. So let's say your product is something that's impacted by a specific sport. Let's say it's a betting app. That would be something that would want to be released before the start of that season, if we ever get live sports back. And then it needs to be inexpensive. So if you are reimagining your entire platform with a pivot, it might not necessarily be a pivot, it might just be a completely new product. But ensuring that you keep all 3 of these things in mind when you're starting to iterate and starting to shift your application to focus on specific features, those are things to keep in mind. So let me give you just a few examples. You might recognize some of the icons on this screen. These are all companies that have had successful pivots. I think it's something about the number of unicorns that have pivoted from their original MVP or their original problem statement. I think it's about 95%. And some of them are up here. I'm going to go through a few examples. So Netflix, we remember back in the day, Netflix mailed you those copies of the DVDs and everything like that. With the generation of online streaming and everything else, especially now, Netflix is booming. That online streaming service is a massive, massive behemoth. And the mail order service is something completely of the past at this point. So them being able to shift here proved massively successful for them. They've even pivoted further now into content generation in that online format. So you can see how that's been very, very great for them. I know we all appreciate them at this time of day. So YouTube also, this is something that originally was a dating site. People were able to put up videos of themselves and say what they wanted in a partner, but people realized, the people at YouTube, I should say, realized that that content generation was much bigger of an interest and much bigger of a draw. So they've shifted primarily towards that. And even they have their own native content they're creating at this point as well, similar to Netflix. With PayPal, so this originally was just a direct, PDA, thank you, PDA to PDA exchange of money kind of situation here. Once they realized that that service was working really well, person to person, they realized that they could apply this to other places. So now PayPal is a primary source of a payment portal for eBay, for a million other different kind of online retailers as well. Slack, we all know and love, used to actually be a video game company called Glitch. So while their game was really popular, they realized that the communication tool was even more popular and could be used in a multitude of different industries. So obviously businesses took on and enterprises caught on really, really quick that this was a great communication tool, and I'm sure just about all of us use it now. Last one I have here, we have Groupon. So Groupon actually originally started as a crowdfunding campaign. You're really able to raise money for causes that you saw fit. From here, they actually originally started Groupon as a way for users to bargain for different deals. And this kind of picked up, obviously, a lot of traction. And now they have their own kind of benchmark here. So we know pivots are a way of startup life. We know it's something that's important, something that'll be really kind of impacted by your market feedback. So you might see, your 10-year plan, but it's going to be so heavily affected by users that are actually getting on your platform. So it's number one affected by that market feedback. So I have just 2 examples real quick that I can go through on our examples of pivots and of MVPs, I should say. So from here, we had a really good product, a really good company, I should say, that came to us with an Excel-based platform. From here, they wanted to bring that online. They had a massive customer base who loved them. Now, the issue that we had here is they went to every single one of their amazing existing customers and said, okay, yes, I can promise you A. Okay, they went to the next one and said, I can promise you B, C, D, E, all the way down through the alphabet and then some. So the issue we had here is that the MVP had too many features that were promised for that first iteration. This is something that would have taken way too long to be able to develop. It's something that did not answer just the core problem that their existing solution did. And the issue that we had here is we never got around to actually finalizing everything to even get to development. So overpromising is not the way to go for MVPs. Making sure that you solve that initial problem, then you can promise I will add all the bells and whistles once we get around to it, is a much more realistic way to approach this kind of development. So the second one I have here, here we're looking for an online travel portal, so you can book a seat, you can book an entire plane. From here, they knew their niche, they knew their audience, and they knew that they had a very specific piece that they wanted to go for. So for here, they took a lot of user feedback into account, whether it came to designs, whether it came to initial pieces of development, whether it came to those 1-2 features that they focus on to primarily begin with. So for here, while we had high-level ideas of where we wanted to go in the future, we didn't actually go into development of pieces until it was market approved, and we had kind of that user feedback that was definitely positive. So from here, being able to start with those core pieces and then additionally add on as it is validated by your market is a much better way to approach that, rather than promising a million things under the sun and not being able to deliver any of them. So from here, I'll open it up for questions. I know we went through a lot of information relatively quickly, so I'm happy to discuss either during this Q&A session or afterwards. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you, Emma. Please go ahead and close off your deck, stop sharing your screen, and share your video again. As a reminder to all the presenters, we do have 5 minutes for questions. Each answer, if you can please limit that to 1 minute and under, that would be helpful for time. It looks like we have one question here. Can I start the MVP without a future plan?
You absolutely can start an MVP without a future plan. That actually is where a lot of people start. We know that we have a problem. We know exactly what a core kind of solution might be for it. From there, your future really can be impacted by the users that are on that platform, that are using that MVP. So while you might have some high-level ideas of where it could go, or even if you don't, your users really are going to be the ones that inform you on where it can go from there.
Okay, great. And another question, is there a timeline that is too late between MVP and pivot in terms of number of years?
I really don't think there can be. Like I said, it's really driven by your market. So this is something that, with Netflix even, we could have stayed in the era of mail order DVDs forever if it had not come along that streaming would become so popular. Streaming wasn't even a thing when they started out with mail order. So with that, it's like I said, it's all about the technologies that come to rise and everything from here.
Got it. Thank you. Most new products don't just skyrocket to success. During these times, what advice do you have for us when we feel like our MVP has less success than what we had hoped or expected?
Can you repeat that question, please?
Yes, most new products don't just skyrocket to success. During these times, what advice do you have for us when we feel like our MVP has less success than we had hoped or expected?
Now, this is something where it comes to comparison. So it's focusing on what success is going to mean for you. Like I mentioned very briefly, success is not always overnight. I mean, if we think about even TikTok went what it seems like relatively overnight as one of the most popular, short form content creation platforms just about of all time at this point. But if you think back, way back in its origination, it started out as something called Musical.ly, and that wasn't necessarily very popular. So while it might not feel like it's happening in your own time, it's something that really is going to be driven by those users. I know I keep coming back to that, but you really have to make sure that you have that right user base in place. So if it feels like your MVP might not be growing at time with your current audience, see how it might be able to pivot, or see how you might be able to shift audiences to expand your growth here.
Okay, great, thank you. How can we avoid our features being stolen from my competitors if they find out about my MVP?
Now, this is something that I know can be, it's a tricky question, and so I'll have to think about that one. I think a little bit longer. But as far as being stolen from your competitors, let's see. I think my biggest advice here would be make yourself so individualized, so make it such a specific solution towards your users that if it's necessarily copied by a competitor, they're still not necessarily in your same niche.
Okay, thank you.
I know we still have a ton of questions and everything coming in. This might be something that we can take offline and answer some more post the event.
Yes, we do have about 30 seconds left, Emma, so I will ask you one last question, and then every other question that came in, we will make sure that we have that answered and sent over to you guys, so don't worry. Is pivoting a must? Excuse me, is pivoting a must, or should this be based on the business type?
I think pivoting is mostly dependent on your feedback. So from here, I think you might have a perfect solution. It might be picked up immediately, and that core kind of problem solution is great. It works, and you can keep kind of just expanding and adding on the extras, the bells and whistles here. But like we saw with my original example, the truck still solves that solution. It still gets from point A to point B, and those are still, you still see trucks all the time on the roads and everything. People are still using them. So while it technically was our MVP example here, it's still a successful product.
Okay, great. Thank you so much, Emma. That was really helpful.
Great.
Perfect. Thank you for presenting today.
All right. Thank you, everyone.